Hello, I am back filming the second half of my burp cloth tutorial. So sorry, it took me a little while. And I'm not done yet. It's late, but not quite 10:30, so I guess that's not quite that late. But so you'll see I sewed these right sides together, so the pattern's facing in, and the last time you saw it, it was the giant square, and what I did was I trimmed around it in the shape that it is, but you can see I didn't, the black line is roughly where they're sewed together, so I trimmed outside of that because you want to make sure you don't snip the threading. And one thing I did this time, which I haven't done before, is where I left the opening to flip it, I cut this tab, I guess you would call it, out so that when I flip the whole thing, and I can show you on one that I flipped, when you sew it, when you top stitch it, it's easier to hold in. What I'm having trouble with on ones that I made for myself is that these pieces, when I just cut straight across, it was too narrow and they would come apart. And it's not a big deal. You know, sometimes the terry cloth will fray a little bit and you just clip it. But when you're giving them to someone, you want, at least I want to try and make things a little bit nicer. So this should help and be easier to sew over. So even if I don't get an exactly straight line, it should hold in better. And after, so these are just cut straight around. After I did that, I'm not sure how it'll be easier to see, on all the rounded parts, and you can see it here, I did it on all four of the corners, and then this whole side, so a little bit of it, I snipped in a little bit, not cutting the thread. You don't want to cut in that far, but this will allow it, once you've flipped the burp cloth in right side out, will allow these edges to lay more flat. They'll spread out better and allow it to lay more flat. So I trimmed the whole thing out first, and then I clipped, just snipped the edge in, and then I flip them right side out, and I think right here's my pocket, or my hole, and then I'll stick, and I'll stick I have a stick or a knitting needle. I was just using a not quite so sharp pair of scissors. And when you do that, it'll kind of push the inner piece out. And to do that, when I flip them, I just stick my finger through and pull a bunch, and then I kind of work it till it flips the right way. And then you'll see here's the little tab piece that I cut, and that way it'll go in a little bit, and it'll the thread, when I sew it shut, will have a little bit to grip onto. And then the next step, sorry about that, didn't mean to jiggle you. The next step is I will press these before I actually sew around. Sometimes it doesn't quite line up and you'll get a little bit of a pucker. It's not a big deal. They still work just fine, and I think they're pretty cute. But it helps a lot if you press the fabric, you wash it before you start everything. You press it before you pin it together and cut it and initially sew it, and then iron it or press it again once it gets to this state, because it's a whole lot easier to sew and it looks a lot better if it's perfectly or almost perfectly flat. And then once you get to this point, I promise, guys, these really are quick to make. It's just taken me a long time to get back up into my craft room. And once it's pressed, then what I do is I take this edge and I put it along the right edge of my presser foot, and that's what I use as a guide for how deep to sew. And then I just sew all the way around. I will typically sew this shut first, so I'll start somewhere back here, back stitch, and sew up this way so that I know this is good and sealed before I work my way around. And you can see I have a couple cute patterns. I have little robots, those airplanes, these animals. This one's puppy dog prints. These are the wrong sides, so you can't see the exact pattern. This is like molecules and little sciencey things. Foxes. And then this was the one I had shown in the original video. And once they're all done, this is not actually one I made now. This is one I made for my daughter. I just stole it out of the laundry, the clean laundry. So, you know, that's better than nothing. So this is what it looks like finished. It's kind of creased because when we store them, I always fold them in half. But I mean, it's not perfect. You can kind of tell, but it's really cute. This has tiny little pink and white stars on it. And over time, the flannel will get, you know, a little nubby and warm, but it stays really soft, and I think it gets softer. And it's really absorbent because it's got the towel in the back. But I sew all the way around and then do my back stitching and call it done. And you can see on this one where it didn't line up and it's kind of pulling out a little bit. Like I said, it's not a big deal to me and it's still totally usable, but when I give someone a gift, I want it to look a little bit more presentable. So I think that tab will work a lot better because it'll end up being somewhere in here, and then it'll give the thread a lot more tooth to grip onto. So then that is what they end up looking like, and I do love it. I did try on some of them I made for her to do like coordinated colored thread, just to kind of make it pop. And maybe if you use a different stitch or a wider stitch, it might make a difference. But I use a fairly small stitch, and even on the white side, you can't, like some of it I used green and purple thread, you can't see it. So it's not worth the time and effort to change your thread and to change your bobbin. Just use white or whatever color terry cloth you're using. White just makes the most sense. But that is it. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. I appreciate watching, and I would also appreciate it if you gave me a thumbs up and click subscribe. So that is it for tonight. Hopefully I will be back soon with more paper crafting videos. I want to get back into that. Just have to finish this first. Talk to you later. Bye.